Reem, John, welcome. Now, hopefully you heard some of that, and hopefully you heard my little, it wasn't a rant, but my little speech. So let's talk now about using these amazing technologies and how we can get better at sort of visibility and performance. But Reem, maybe we start with a little bit of a history lesson. When did visibility in supply chains become so critical, and how are we thinking about it? How are you thinking about it? How should we think about visibility in the supply chain?
Absolutely. So test. Am I audible? Okay, perfect.
Wonderful, thank you.
So, assalamu alaikum jami'an, masakum Allah bil khair, and thank you very much for having me here today. So, visibility has always been crucial when it comes to supply chain management. But what happened in the year 2020 surged its importance dramatically. And before 2020, supply chain visibility was all about tracking inventory, managing supplier relationships, and it relied heavily on manual processes and siloed systems. And let me give you here two examples before the year 2020. So actually the semiconductor industry, it lacked predictions and it lacked quickly responding to disruptions. Also, the automotive industry faced some challenges because it focused on just-in-time manufacturing model. And that's what happened in the year 2020. COVID hit the world and we had big disruptions, we had lockdowns, we had factory closures. So actually, this was a turning point when it comes to supply chain visibility because, when it comes to the previous examples that I mentioned, the semiconductor industry, it was affected heavily. There was a big shortage that impacted many industries, including the automotive industry. So this actually highlighted the importance of visibility. And according to a research that was done by The Economist, 59% of supply chain officers and 52% of COOs, they identified visibility as their top priority concern. So visibility has always been important, and it became more important after the year 2020.
I didn't ask you to say that, so again, Economist Impact research, tick. Well done, well done. John, I find all this stuff so interesting. This is my favourite conference. I could talk all day, but I want to ask you about how some of these changes and all the things we've been discussing over the first half a day of this event, is this changing sort of reporting lines? We talked before earlier, just 20 minutes ago, about changing KPIs, but are sort of reporting lines changing as people need new skills, they need to have better visibility? Is that changing how people are reporting into their boards, their CEOs, and so on?
Absolutely. Yes. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, John, for the invitation here. I mean, one of the key trends that we see across the globe, depending on sector, of course, is that the procurement reporting structure is pivoting towards the COO as opposed to the CFO. And in my opinion, that's a really good thing because it shows the supply chain and procurement is really indispensable to the business. And you know what? The data supports it. I think Reem and I read the same report, but the Economist Impact report, they had a report recently called the Procurement Imperative 2024 survey, which includes over 2,300 C-level executives. And one of the key findings, in addition to a lot of the things that we've talked about here today already around digitalization and diversification and ESG, was that these CPOs are reporting to COOs now. There was a year-over-year increase of 90% of CPOs that went from reporting to CFOs and others to reporting to the COO just last year. It's amazing. And if you think about it, even in certain sectors, I'm familiar with the aerospace and defense and auto industries, they report, the procurement supply chain leaders report directly to the board in automotive, at BMW, at Volkswagen, and at Lockheed Martin. They report directly to the board. So it's a huge importance in the roles of procurement. So even in everyday life, right, I think everyone can relate to the fact of, in my personal journey here, I've reported to a lot of different leaders. And when you start to report to a different leader or a different organization, it's a mindset. And for the CPOs now, this mindset is about, not having to rely so much on cost savings, but more on supplier innovation and supplier diversity and, different areas. So yes, big time.
And if I throw it on just a random question, is that people seeing the same shift in an organization? You're moving from the CFO to COO. Have you seen some change in your reporting lines?
Yep.
Yeah. 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 Good.
And actually, if you allow me, John, to add
Please.
to that point, last week I was in a conference in Riyadh, and they were talking about the number of CPOs who are turning to become CEOs, and this number is increasing heavily. So actually, this is an additional point to what John just mentioned.
It's a power shift. CPO's taken over the world. Nice. I like it.
Yes.
I like it. I like it. So just coming back to, I love this stuff. Coming back to technology. So just more on the how. Technology broadly speaking.
Right.
How does that help? Look at visibility. And what I'm interested in too is like the tiers. Supply chains are incredibly complex, multiple tiers. How does technology help us get better visibility throughout all those tiers?
Sure. So technology is here for the rescue. And I'm going to use some examples from what the previous panels just mentioned. So we talked about different types of technologies. We talked about Internet of Things and how to use GPS trackers and IoT sensors in order to track shipments. Also, what is the biggest technology trend that everybody is talking about nowadays? And it was the subject of the previous panel. What it is? AI, exactly. So AI can be used in order to predict trends, to see how the world is moving and how the world is shifting. Machine learning is integrating data from various sources in order to make decisions based on the data that you have in hand. What else? We talked also about digital twins. You can have a virtual world of your supply chain digitally, so you can simplify simulation, you can do experiments easily without risking.
And you're seeing more of those I find digital twins really interesting. Are you seeing more of those?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
And people are like mapping their entire actual digitally.
Yes.
I think, too, one of the big areas I like to talk about is suppliers and supplier spend.
Right.
And I think there's two ways technology can help in those areas. One is strategic and one is more operational. But I read recently that only 1% of CEOs talk to their top suppliers. If you ask a CEO to name his top 3 customers, top of his tongue, right off. Top 3 suppliers, not so much.
Right.
And those two ways, strategically, it's around, we call it now the spend control tower or the supply chain. Everything has control tower on the end now. We also call it nerve center, but that's a way to look at traditional KPIs like on time in full and lead time. But as we talked about earlier, there's different KPIs. They call them KRIs, key risk indicators, KSIs, key sustainability indicators. So using analytics and visibility to look at those different KPIs in today's world. And the operational side is just connecting with your suppliers from a collaboration, a transactional standpoint around inventory, planning, committing, and quality. So those are the areas I see in technology really helping these days.
So John, what was it? KRI? Is that risk?
KRI. I think I made that up myself.
I like it.
Key risk indicator. No, it's a...
Given we're in the risk and resilience part of the event, I mean, what would that look like? What are people saying? Like, is it like minimizing downtime, minimizing, I don't know, lack of inventory? What?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's some of the traditional KPIs kind of rebranded a little bit and focus more on risk. Yeah.
Yep.
Geopolitical risk, diversity, those kind of things. Diversification, diversification of suppliers, not diversity.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I find risk fascinating. I used to do it back at the EIU in my previous job in the group. But what I find fascinating about risk is not all risks come to fruition.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So it's so fascinating. We have use all these great technologies, digital twins, and so on. But not every risk we worry about. So are there tensions? I always love tension. Moderators love tensions. Are there tensions between sort of different indicators? Like you've got key risk indicators, but you have, I don't know, like pure cost minimization indicators. Are there ever challenges between these different objectives?
I believe absolutely yes. Like, for example,
We plan for the worst.
Right,
Go ahead.
If we want to talk, for example, about using robotics, yes, there is going to be a big clash because you're going to spend a lot about acquiring these robotics and programming them. But on the opposite side, actually, you're going to minimize the error. You're going to spare your team by actually not letting them do the repetitive task, but more focus on the strategic activities and let the robots do the things. So there is a clash.
Yeah.
And I just gave an example, actually. Maybe
Yeah, they
John
talk
has
about like
another.
expected risk and residual risk.
Yep.
I mean, looking at things like that,
Yeah.
third-party risk. Yeah.
Super interesting. And that's a nice segue. Thank you very much for the segue. I'm very interested in like, not the technologies themselves, but how people choose investment, because money's limited, clearly.
Exactly.
Teams are limited, resource, like everyone has that sort of constraint. But in all these interesting technologies, we've all talked about in the last hour or so, just how do people think through which investment I need to make? How do people do the how?
That's an important question because, as you said, there's not enough money to do everything. So always start with the end goal in your mind. Okay, I'm gonna use technology in order to achieve better efficiency, to achieve better visibility, for example, to improve my customer experience. So always have a clear vision, a clear end goal in mind, and then start by assessing your status quo. See, what are you lacking? Are you lacking, for example, people skills? Are you lacking processes, automation, for example, or workflows? Are you lacking technology improvement? So after assessing that and having the goal in mind, then you can use technology in order to skill up your team, improve your processes to achieve actually that goal.
John, this is really interesting too. I mean, that all makes sense. The vision, have a clear goal. But you were talking earlier about sort of the changing sort of reporting lines and the vision needs to be clear, I imagine.
Yes.
Whoever you report to, so then is that...
The vision may change with the new reporting structures, right? But I would say my advice to customers is get started. Get started, right? I think it was Hans from DP World that was up here earlier, talked about, before investing big, start small, right? Have some proof. Have time to value is an important indicator for my customers. So, start with something. Start with a supplier collaboration program, a pilot. Start with dabble in an AI program. And what I've found is that customers have been able to start small, and the benefits and the savings they acquired from starting small were able to fund a bigger initiative. And I've seen that across the board. The other thing I would say on this topic is what I'm seeing, and I'm from the US, North America, but we find that everything was around digital transformation, ERP transformations. Well, a lot of the customers, a lot of the companies are finished with their ERP transformation. Not all of them. I know a lot of them are still struggling with that, but a lot of them are in the planning or they're almost finished. And they're coming to us and saying, what's next?
Yeah.
What do we do after this ERP digital transformation? And I think the one that's percolating up the most is supply chain and procurement modernization programs. So
it's so interesting you say, Joe, because I mean one of my themes of the last panel was experimentation. Like we're not there with AI. Like I think we're genuinely in an experimentation phase. But John, you're saying like start small. It feels like people do need to experiment.
Exactly.
See what works. Because some things, not everything. I mean, part of experimentation is some things won't work.
Yeah, people need to experiment. That's why actually we mentioned the digital twins and the virtual world before. And also John just mentioned a very important thing, which is scalability. Yeah. You need to start small and then grow bigger. That's why, you need actually to have in your vision, in your vision board, for example, how to grow tomorrow. Think about tomorrow, not only today. So this is very important. Another important thing also after digital transformation is building data-driven cultures where people can use data in order to come up with decisions.
I think setting up, I heard this earlier today too, and I totally agree, is if you start small, you can set the guardrails, right? For the bigger program. It flushes out all the issues most of the issues if you, include a diverse set of suppliers or diverse set of industries, whatever it is, start small, get the guardrails worked out, right? And then you can kind of move forward from there, yeah.
And John, we're running out of time, but let me fire one more question at you. I imagine the internal communications, therefore, you're experimenting, you start small, you've got a vision, you've also got to communicate those successes maybe internally to sort of win over everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Different constituents in the company, if you can start small and show big wins, everyone wants to be part of that, right? So it's easy to get new constituents to come on board and be, your sponsor for certain additional pilots and programs. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we hear a lot about procurement supply chain having to bring more value, that big word value to companies. And I can only imagine everything you've both been saying. This is part of it.
Yeah.
Maybe experimenting, starting small, but bringing that value and sharing it across the organization. Listen, any last thoughts? I mean, there's a lot going on here with AI and these amazing technologies, digital twins, but any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Sure, absolutely. So as you just mentioned, we have a lot of diverse technologies. You need to pick up the right technology and employ it the right way in order to get to your goal.
Absolutely. I do like that clarity, the clarity of the goal. What's the problem you're trying to solve, or what's the value you're trying to bring, being clear on that, finding it, experimenting it, showing the value internally, and then celebrating how great procurement and supply chain people really are. Anyway, we've run out of time. Please join me in thanking Reem and John for a great conversation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.